Hello and welcome to the very first live broadcast for the Great Commandment Anthology. My name is Jack Holder, your editor extraordinaire, as well as contributor. And today we are going to be talking with several creators for the Commandment Anthology, tell you what we're doing, and just have a grand old time here. So, first off, let's talk about what the Great Commandment is. We have commands in every aspect of our lives. Some small, like, go to your room or do the dishes. Some larger, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish order and such. And some that are so important that they have to be made art, live long and prosper. But what does that mean for us today? The Great Commandment is a comics anthology delving into what drives us forward in life. What commands do we personally follow? How do we interpret them? And how important are they to hold on to? And to more fully answer that question, we have some of the creators here talking about their work both as a part of this anthology and beyond. And we're starting with a real all-star in the indie community, a USA Today bestselling author. He has also created books such as Katrina Hates the Dead, My Father Didn't Kill Himself, and the editor for the Wannabe Press anthologies, Monsters and Other Scary, I'm not going to say that word, and the two Cthulhu is Hard to Spell anthologies. Ladies and gentlemen, Russell Nohelty.
Thank you for having me.
So, Russell, I try to do a little bit of justice to your self. Can you talk a little bit about yourself and a Kickstarter that's kind of caught fire right now?
Sure. So I make all of these books behind me and a bunch more. So I have been in about a dozen anthologies, I think. I don't know, I lost count, as well as producing. The thing I'm best known for is producing the Cthulhu is Hard to Spell anthology series. But the very first book that I ever made was called Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter. It's about a mental patient that escapes from an asylum and becomes a monster hunter, but doesn't know if he's killing monsters, humans, or it's all in his head the whole time. So I brought the first book to Kickstarter in September of 2014. And now I pretty much do a Kickstarter every year in September, at least, if nothing else. And last year, we brought the book back to Kickstarter for the 5th issue. And now we are on Kickstarter for the whole 2nd volume. And we are about to finalize production on the 3rd volume. So yeah, it's I believe at $18,274 from 513 backers, if I remember my numbers correctly. But yeah, it's a wonderful little book. It's the most difficult book that I ever write because it's very hard to move between what the real reality is, to get people excited for to invest in characters who may not be real, and to still keep that kind of perspective switching fresh over the course of as many volumes as we have done. It's easily the most frustrating book to write, but also the most rewarding when it all comes through. And it's also the one that people have asked me the most questions about since 2010 when I started making it. So it's pretty gratifying that a book that I've worked on for a decade is still going strong and having its best campaign ever.
That is wonderful. So if you're interested in that, you can actually look at the banner below, and we have Russell's Kickstarter link down, so you can check it out. I believe several of us here are backers. Now, I love having Russell a part of this anthology and the first one, Why Faith, because he very much approaches faith in a different manner. In fact, I remember asking him to do the very first anthology, and his response was, "Are you sure?"
I actually believe that I said I have no good things to say about Catholicism, so I think I'm the wrong person to be in this anthology.
But I kept pushing him, and he ended up coming out with this amazing comic about Taoist thought. And when the Great Commandment was coming together, he was like, "Can we do something that keeps following this?" So, can you talk a little bit about Life is Suffering?
Sure. So I respond much more to Eastern philosophy than Western philosophy. I've been studying Buddhism and Taoism and Hinduism and Shintoism since I was probably 10 or 11 years old, and one of the things that so the first story was about the way, the river, and like following the river and not struggling against what's going on, and you'll find happiness. And it was about two hippos in a river. One was struggling against the current, and one was going with it. And so I wanted to talk, especially in 2020, about like this concept of like the Buddhist concept of like that life is suffering, and I wanted to use the same characters because I think Angela, the thing I love about Taoism especially is the simplicity of it, and I think Angela Odling, who's the artist for both of the stories, has this way of like catching the very small moments in a way that like is both powerful and shows that that like the small moments can be beautiful too. It's not a thing that I do often. Usually my books are very large and there's a lot of explosions and monsters and fighting. And so working with Angela was great because it was able to take this big concept and make it simple and beautiful, and that like that there, and show that there can be beauty in the suffering, and that sort of explain what that commandment really means, because it's not quite what people seem to make it out to be.
That is amazing. Thank you, Russell. I want to make sure that I get to Jay Mooers because he is coming to us live from the work site, making sure he tells us about his work, both with Eden Park Tales, with Autumn Gray, and his own comic, Tear Me Away. So how are you today, Jay?
Hi, I'm good. Enjoying my lunch break. Here I am. So, would you like me to talk about my previous work?
Talk about Autumn Gray, and if you can as well, tell us a little bit about your anthology piece. So if people want to check out Eden Park Tales, here's the link.
Well, I have my own publishing company called Eden Park Tales. I've had it since 2010. I started writing children's novels with it, and then I branched out into comics. My flagship comic that I started on this label is called Autumn Gray, which is about a girl who hunts fairies and monsters through the woods of New Hampshire. It's the current series. I actually just finished an Indiegogo for the 8th issue of the series. There's 10 to the whole story, so I'm almost there. But I'm sorry, I am so distracted. I've got construction going on behind me and everything. But so that was basically the comic I started with. I do a lot of work for Dynamite now, Fivefinity, a couple other publishers. I've done a lot of book covers, children's books for different companies. I stick mostly to more of the fantasy genre, but I've done a lot of horror. I've done a lot of children's books. I've been in a lot of different collections, and now I'm looking forward to being a part of this collection. My comic I did for this one is called Tear Me Away, and it's kind of an abstract, like you don't even really know where you are in the story you're kind of you're with a character who's forgotten what he's done, and you kind of learn with him what he's done and how he deals with it. It's kind of like a commandment, how you handle it personally, as opposed to something that someone commands you to do.
And I really liked with this one, you incorporated music. Tear Me Away really seems to take place in the midst of a concert, though by the end of it, you're wondering if it's not just going all through the person's head. How is incorporating music into that helpful or a challenge?
Well, I feel a lot of times like you can express abstract emotions with music. So I think like it helps. It's tough in a comic because you can't hear the music, but you still get that mood and that feeling from it.
And I think we have unfortunately lost Jay. We will circle back to him. So when we're trying to go through this, yeah, he is trying to jump back in. Jay, are you here? There we go. So, Jay, you were talking about music when we lost you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't even know where I was before it stopped me. But basically, I was saying that music, I feel like it's a great way to portray abstract emotions instead of like having to necessarily put things in words. So I like the idea of blending that with the comic to create that kind of abstract emotion.
Excellent. So we are actually gonna let Jay go. I know he's got.
Sorry, I don't have a great connection here.
Well, no matter what, people will have a chance to see Jay in an interview next month. So definitely check out Eden Park Tales and hope to see you soon, Jay.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Excellent. So, for me personally, doing Why Faith and the Great Commandment came easily because I have a master's in divinity, master's Pratt. So one of the people that I had a big affinity with is also a master's Pratt who said, "Screw it, I want to do comics." And Jason, your work for Why Faith and the Great Commandment has gotten very abstract. Can you talk about the background and the character of Faith?
So my background, I won't go too much into it because I can save a lot of that for the interview. My background, I pastor's kid, grew up as a son of a minister. Both my parents are actually ministers, and I went to school to study film. Film wasn't the right fit for me. Sort of wandered around for a bit until I eventually stumbled into writing comics, and yeah, I've always been interested in storytelling. Storytelling has always been, particularly visual storytelling, and I've always been very drawn to visual stories that play with the medium that they are conveying their stories in. So when you talk about commandments, a great commandment, my first thought was initially I wanted to explore storytelling. That's always where my brain always is. How can I pick apart storytelling in this medium that I'm in? So that was initially where my thoughts went, and that from there I just started exploring and ended up where I ended up.
And does this seem to tie into your webcomic with organic fast food?
So certainly there's a a relation. Both the monk character who shows up in Why Faith and in this book also shows up in my webcomic, Organic Fast Foods. So there's a connection there. And part of my webcomic deals a lot with internal world. One of the characters has a very vivid internal world that he likes to explore. And that is also another area of fascination and interest to me, has always been people's inner world and my own inner world. So the monk has always been a character I've used in a lot of stories to sort of it's almost like a proxy for myself, so I can interact with my own characters and ask them questions and have them wrestle with creator creation relationships. And so Why Faith sort of became the first book, I introduced Faith, the character, because she was sort of somebody who was exploring faith, and I thought for the sake of that book, she was the right character. And then for this book, I wanted to maybe explore a little bit more the monk character and his relationship to faith. I'm losing my train of thought, so I think I got it.
Well, I'm hearing about this. You love doing web comics, and with this web comic about my personal issues where I can get completely in my head. And all I'm thinking right now is this is the perfect segue to talk about graduation nightmares with Teresa.
Okay.
I was trying to be a good interviewer, and I started looking at graduation nightmares. And the first thought was, Teresa, why do you have all of my innermost fears? This is not fair. Can you talk about your work?
Well, I would say like graduation nightmares is the result of me not being a writer. And so as a result of that, I'm discovering writing it. And obviously what happens when you do that is you just write whatever you know about or whatever you've experienced. And the first idea that came to mind when I was trying to start this graphic novel was, what experience do I have that is pretty universal? And I think the experience of finishing education or finishing a stage of your life and having to jump into something completely different and being terrified and lost is pretty universal. So I went for that. And then if you mix with that the fact that I have night terrors, then that's where the nightmares come in, because they're very vivid dreams and you wake up screaming, and I give my boyfriend a heart attack every time. So I was trying to like use those two experiences and bring them together.
And you do it with an art style that really makes you feel like I'm 22 and I'm supposed to be a grown-up adult at this point. Why don't I?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, is that I think it's a really interesting stage of life that I wanted to reflect a little bit on. And is that moment where you're not a teenager, you're not exactly an adult, you're in that in between, and you're supposed to be an adult, but you still don't know how to. And I think that's basically what I'm trying to communicate in this comic. Is like, no, there's no way to be an adult. You just have to start following your own intuition and making your own choices without anyone telling you what to do. That's basically what being an adult is.
Do you think that translates a little bit into your work in The Great Commandment with Eddie and Sam for Warrior Breed? Because it really seems to jump into what our personal identities of ourselves sometimes don't seem to jive with outside interactions.
Right, yeah. Well, Warrior Breed is basically, we knew that we wanted to collaborate together, like Eddie and me, and I wanted Sam to do the backgrounds. And he sort of told me, what do you like to draw? And I said, dogs with clothes. And then the rest just came from that. And he said, "Oh, I've been reading this book. It's really interesting." And it was just a conversation between me, who is the character artist, and inker and no, I'm not the inker on this one. I'm the character artist and the colorist, and Sam is the inker and the background artist. And it was just like talking, the three of us, and coming up with what do we enjoy writing, drawing, and just we went from there. So that's where it all came from, really.
I loved being able to post and talk about this because it very much was a lot of the creators in anthologies don't get a chance to see everyone's work at the exact same time. Sometimes when we're posting, it's the very first time people get to see this. So I got to see fellow creators going, "Oh my God, this art style. There's a dog and a samurai outfit."
That was kind of my idea. It's like, can it be a samurai? And Eddie was like, "Sure, why not?"
And Eddie, for the anthology submission process, he was asking me, going, "Can I talk about Sun Tzu's Art of War, but we're going to use dogs?"
Yeah.
And I'm like,
that was basically the concept.
and I'm like, the last anthology and this one, we have Taoism and hippos. So let's do this.
Yeah, it was interesting for me because I didn't know where he was going with it. It's like, well, I've been thinking about this book, and it sounded really serious to me. And it's like, we're still doing dogs with clothes, right? And he was like, yeah, don't worry, it's all gonna come together in the end. And somehow it did. I think it is an interesting comic. It's an interesting mix of the style and the story and everything else. And I think it's a true collaboration where everyone just put their little bit. And Eddie was very flexible. I have to say this is all thanks to Eddie, because we were just throwing things at him. I like drawing towers. I like drawing dogs with clothes. And then you as an editor saying it has to be about faith. And Eddie was like, what do I do? And this is the result of that process.
Excellent. So I want to ask our last artist right here, because what he's got, we've got samurai dogs, Taoist hippos, talking about faith and meta. What do we need? We need Vikings.
Resident Viking.
Resident Viking here, Matt Crafton of Space Viking Productions. And his comic is called Worthy and taking us all the way to the gates of Valhalla. So can you talk about this? Because I know you were having wonderful challenges in creation.
That's a beautiful way to put it, actually. It was just like halfway through, I was like, is this even okay to do? Like, is this something that is going to receive backlash, or is this something that people will even want? Like, the type of people I'm trying to empower with this, like, are they even going to appreciate it, or are they going to hate me for it? It was a big, like, scary moment for me. I was like, I still want to do this, so I better talk to Jack and see if this is going to be all right. But yeah, for Worthy, it was really something I've always wanted to do. It was even before all this really intense stuff has been happening in our society. It was even before then.
Can you elaborate on this? Because I'm sure there are a lot of viewers who are like, what's he talking about?
Oh, right. So there's a lot of people who are very into Norse mythology that are basically co-opting it in the name of white supremacy. And nowhere in any of the mythology does it say that white men are the only people allowed in Valhalla. There's nowhere that says that. It's all poetic, very godlike stories, but there's no mention of skin color. There's no mention of where they come from or why. And I'm like, why are you guys thinking that this is about that? It was never about that. And then probably should. I mean, mythology can. I always feel like mythology can evolve with the times, like how things go and how people feel can affect how it, should evolve. And so when I saw this happening, I'm like, this, I can't let this go. I need to do something about it. And then with Command Men, I was like, well, this is kind of the perfect opportunity for, that's kind of a commandment to say that only white men who are warriors can go to Valhalla. And I've wanted this idea out there for a long time, that what happens to the people who are in service industry? Why can't they go to Valhalla? You know, what happens to people who, what about the kids that die before their time? Why can't they go to Valhalla? They weren't warriors. They didn't have time to be warriors. So it didn't make any sense that if you're going to have a heaven, and if you've lived a full life, then that should be enough. Nothing else should matter about, how you end up there.
I really love talking about this, especially because we have Russell right over there, because what Russell is doing with, I get the name right, the Shittyverse.
Not anymore. Now it's the God's verse.
God's verse. And he loves diving into all mythologies, especially Christian, and not subverting, but flipping it on its head.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely true. I think for the mythology, well, the God's Verse Chronicles is all about how all gods exist. They just kind of suck. And so the god that so all gods are real, and they all, when there's a habitable world is formed, all the gods kind of come and make sure that it is sustainable. And then they all leave, leaving one regent in charge. And we got stuck with Bacchus, who's a vain drunk, which is how we got how everything is going wrong. But there's that, as you go on, you meet Norse gods and Egyptian gods. And the new book I just finished has a large section about Hindu gods. And so it is kind of expanding as we go to the end of the universe. But yeah, I do love all of those things that you just mentioned.
Awesome. But yeah, so my piece for Commandment basically is just a very short story about a man named Jacob who finds himself in Valhalla and isn't quite sure if he belongs there. And Heimdall and Odin basically welcome him and say, "You've done plenty in your life. You were there for your family. Everything that you've done was of worth. So here you are," and that's pretty much the entire comic. But I really tried to get across that feeling of it's not about, where you come from, or what, I hesitate to say about your skin color or your religion even, because, who knows what the afterlife is.
So, very much the number one question I get when I talk about my faith and the Great Commandment, when people start looking at my background, they're like, "Okay, this is another Christian conversion book. Thanks, but thanks." I'm like, "No, Russell's in here." And
Wait.
we have Taoist hippos, and we have Jewish stories, atheist stories, agnostic stories. In Why Faith, we have a Dungeons and Dragons God coming in. And all of that. And now it's really interesting because we can say for people who read Why Faith that we have not one but two continuations of stories in this, with Jason's Storyteller Circle and Russell's Life is Suffering. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities with continuing those stories? Jason, go first.
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a challenge because you don't want to automatically assume people have the foundation of Why Faith, even though you want to encourage people to have, go out and buy Why Faith. But you can't assume that they have that foundation when you're writing the story. So you have to navigate the story in a way that leaves room for somebody who might have just picked up the book off the shelf and is reading through it for the first time, not knowing who these characters are, and can still get a message, get a journey out of that experience that is complete for them while also peppering in and giving information more, or a continuation of information for people who have the background or have the experience of having explored these characters or know these characters from a previous story. So it was a challenge, but it was sort of a fun challenge.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to when you bring a character from your universe into an anthology.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you have to give it a complete experience. This is from my own editing experience. The hardest part is telling people that they can't be in the anthology because, like, their piece does not stand alone. And it's really important to have something that stands alone, that somebody can enjoy who is not part of the universe. But you also want to give somebody an inroad into the story so that they can go and find out more about you or find out more about, like, the other things that you make. But you can't do it in a way that alienates. So you have to play two games. You have to play the game of, like, I need to give somebody who knows what's happening this introduction to me that they will then want to go out and, like, find more information or find more books about this topic. But you also have to do fan service to the people who already know that information from the past. So, like Jason said, it's hard to balance that because you can't go too deep, but you also can't be too shallow, and you can't tell something. You can't give an experience to somebody that they have to be in the in crowd to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I've seen this in anthologies, nothing that me or Russell are connected to, but people who have done things like, why don't I use my anthology as an opportunity to pretty much write a prologue for my books? And I'm reading this going, you can't do that.
Yeah.
I feel like you just gave me the first chapter. That's not an anthology piece. Matt was able to take the entirety of Valhalla and the experiences and fears, and I was very cruel to him. I'm like, you get 2 pages for Valhalla. That's it.
Well, didn't you ask for 2 pages? I was trying to do it 1 page, and you asked for 2.
Yes, that's right.
And I was like, no, you're right. 2 pages. I need more. I do need more. More room.
I wanted to make sure everything was an even number of pages. Quick tip for anyone who is interested in becoming the editor of a comics anthology: only accept even number pages. It immensely makes your life easier.
I can't even imagine if you had like 4 or 5 people with like 5, 7, 3. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Trying to figure out everything to make sure, okay, this is a fun page reveal, but I need to make sure it fits perfectly in on here. Now, Teresa, how fun was it diving into Eastern culture and mythology?
Well, I did some research and I watched some history videos and I looked at the samurai. I was focusing more on being like sort of historically accurate, while, you know, it's kind of like, you know, when you're role playing and there's like the rules of the game and then there's like the rule of cool, and you kind of have to balance those two. So I was looking at the actual samurai, you know, the way they would dress and the weapons they would use, and I was thinking, and the ninjas as well. I was looking at the ninja because there's a ninja in the comic as well. So I was looking at all of that, and there was a mismatch between like the coolest samurai armor and the coolest ninja outfit. And I was like, okay, so do I throw out the window the accuracy and just make the ninja lame or the samurai lame, or do I make them both cool? And then, you know, maybe make a footnote. And I talked to Eddie, and he was like concerned, like, well, maybe we should be respectful. Maybe we should be, accurate. And then I remember Mission Impossible 2. I don't know if you've seen Mission Impossible 2. There's a part, or was it 3? I can't remember. There's a part where they go to Spain, which is my country, and they go to this thing where they have like the Virgin Mary, and then they set her on fire, and it's like, what the hell? Because they mix 2 traditions, which is the Eastern parades where you take the Virgin Mary out for a parade, to be happy about her existence, and then the other one where you burn big figures of things that are sinful. So they mixed those 2 and they set the Virgin Mary on fire. And I was thinking, like, everyone here that watched that understood what they were mixing it because it looks cooler. And we were like, oh, what the hell is, it's Mission Impossible, whatever. So coming from an experience of seeing a property that is using my own culture in a mixed way to make it look cooler and thinking, that's okay. So I thought, yeah, I think it's okay to do that. So I did the research and then I cheated a bit so that it looked better. That's basically what I did.
Nice.
I learned a lot about medieval Japan. It was interesting.
What I'm getting from all 4 creators here is trying to figure out how to be compelling story-wise while also being respectful with Teresa and 4 guys that look like they just stepped out of a mayonnaise jar. And I was extremely grateful for that, for both White Faith and the Great Commandment, because growing up in New England, just trying to figure out how to be actually engaging and respectful of things that I don't either know enough about or want to know more, but it's not from my wheelhouse. And Matt and I were pretty much calling and asking some of our friends, going, please tell me this is not going to be a really bad idea. And I liked what Russell seemed to actually not get around this, but tackle with Eastern philosophy by making it even more allegorical with the hippos.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the point, right? I mean, I don't know. Like, that's the point that I got from like what you were trying to do, was like to tell a universal story allegorically, like a fable. I when I read the book finally, I realized that some people just like smashed you across the nose with it. But your brief was about how you wanted to bring people into religion that maybe were lost and didn't have a basis for like how to grapple with faith while still like retaining their own sense of identity, or they didn't understand how like faith could work in their everyday life, or and for me, like that completely like brought back fables to me. Like that's what fables were. Like that's what fairy tales are. Fairy tales are a way to make sense of the world that doesn't make sense. And so it made, I think I was a little bit more on the nose with this second anthology piece. But for the first one, well, first of all, like Taoism is like it's a very simple but a very odd religion as like a thing that exists. Like basically it states that there's the main overall tenet is there's a sort of pathway or river, or it's usually made as like a river that like flows through your life. And like as you if you give into it and you just like let it wash over you and like lead you, then like things are going to be relatively easy for you, or like things are, you know, like you're like basically anytime you're struggling, it's because you're struggling against the path that like this way has made for you, which like is great unless you're like think of like, oh well a bunch of people were slaves, like a bunch of people were like have like terrible like there's all of these like caveats that you have to like then carve out. But for me, it became about just, things may not be perfect. Like I wanted to make film. Like I didn't want to be a U.S. Today best-selling author. I wanted to be Quentin Tarantino. But like being able to enjoy the process of like what is happening to you right now. And, I think about Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning a lot, and finding meaning in like whatever the suffering is that you have, or like whatever the place you are right now. There's a moment in the Why Faith anthology and in my piece where she like has this banana. And the person, like so there's a hippo that's struggling, and there's a hippo that's just succumbing to the river, and he's the one is struggling because he is trying desperately to get to the best banana tree, like the best banana tree in the whole thing, and he knows it's like just right over the horizon. And meanwhile, this person, like there's bananas that are just falling because like there's bananas everywhere. And the one who is succumbing, who's the purple hippo, she just takes the banana and she's like, it's pretty good. Like, it's not perfect, like, but it's a pretty good banana. And it's a better banana than like you have no bananas right now. Like you have nothing, like you have no bananas. You're struggling against this current. Like maybe one day you get to the current. But like that banana, like meanwhile, like you're going to miss all of these bananas that are falling all around you. And to me, the story is about, the path and the way of faith, but it's also about like how you really need to find a meaning with whatever the thing is that you're doing, and find something, again, to not go back to Viktor Frankl, but like it's such an important book where he's like in a concentration camp, like the worst possible thing that could ever.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, you first.
Okay.
Eddie, you there?
Yeah.
Eddie, how's the connection?
I think he's gonna have to like sign in or something.
Re-sign in, Eddie. Sorry about that, Russ. Really jumping into the very essence of what you were going for. In sometimes we take what we can get and not for Taoism and not demand what we can't have.
Well, yeah, I mean, to go back to what I was the Man's Search for Meaning is it was about like in the people that survived the concentration camp, like were the ones that could find meaning, and the ones who thrived afterwards were the ones who could like find meaning in these simple little moments of and find joy in the things that were happening. It's not that like it was a joyful place. It was just that like when it's dark, like when you can't, when like nothing is going right, or like when you're in a horrible place, like the way that you get through it, or the way that you can get through it, is to like sort of succumb to it and just try to find like whatever the best thing you can pull out there. And I've been saying this a lot recently, that like the most punk rock thing you can do when everything is falling apart is to create things, and like to put love into the world, because punk rock is seen as like one thing. It's seen as like this like Johnny Rotten or whatever, but it's really just like taking what the world is and what authority is giving you, and like throwing back something else, and showing them that like you are not going to succumb to whatever like people are telling you that you must do. And right now I feel like the world is so much about like you must like you must hate the other person, you must like destroy all, like the world is burning around me. I live in California, so the world is literally burning around me, and like the way that I get through it is just to sort of like succumb to like whatever that pressure is that is coming, and then and find the joy in the banana that may not be the best banana ever, but like a banana is pretty good, like any banana is pretty good, and understanding that, like, yes, that banana that I've been chasing for my life could be like 10% better or 20% better, but like the thing that, like, it's still pretty good. Like the thing that's happening is good, and and the minute that I like flow back and I allow myself to just sit in the stream and listen to what like is available and what's possible, instead of figuring out what is like what I want and what I'm missing, things just became easier, and they become easier more and more and more as time goes on. And I say, like, oh, these 7 doors are like close to me, but like, look at these 4 windows are open, or like all of this stuff, and flowing in that way. And so it's really hard to put that in words. As you can tell, I've been talking for like 3 to 5 minutes about like this concept. But like, it's very easy to put in an allegory of like 2 hippos sitting in a lake, and one of them's thrashing against the water, and one of them is just succumbing to and is floating around downstream. And it seems so silly when like clearly this banana is pretty good. It's not the best banana, but it's a pretty good banana. And like, to be able to, that's why I love fables and fairy tales, because they can take these very heady concepts and explain to them in a way that a 4-year-old can understand. And I think that is like, that's true mastery of a subject. Like when you can use the simplest language possible to explain a concept, so that even somebody who isn't familiar with like the universe, a 3-year-old could at least grasp what you're trying to say.
Right.
Yeah.
Just diving in, and we have a cat.
Yeah. I really like
Sorry.
they use hippos and bananas. The banana thing, I'm a fan. Yeah, no, I wanted to say, like, I really like using animals in stories, not because I'm a furry or something. I don't have anything against furries, by the way. But I think like furries can have kind of claim in the internet culture the usage of anthropomorphic animals or talking animals, when in fact animals are a great way to convey ideas without saying anything about identity, because animals are animals. So in a time where identity has become so central to storytelling, at times you just want to draw a dog because anyone could be that dog, because no one is a dog really. And we've seen these type of animals being used in comics for a while, obviously, but especially with fables, I think it's a great example. Like there's this book that I read as a kid with all animal fables, and I loved it, and that's why I love drawing animals in stories, because they're so easy to use as a avatar for anyone. You could be the fox, you could be the crow. Why not? You could be either of them or both of them.
You seem to be referencing Aesop and
No, actually, but it's a similar one. It's a medieval thing, but it stole from Aesop as well.
I mean, religion and faith is one of the hardest things to talk about today, bar none. The only thing that might be harder is politics, and that dives into another major show that I don't particularly want to jump into until November 4th.
Mm-hmm.
And what you can see with this anthology is you're going to be seeing some harder stories talking about suffering and worthiness. You're going to see it presented lighthearted, and mostly what's going to happen with each and every one of these stories is something about you as a reader is going to change. Like you're going to understand a little bit about the aspects of story or Taoist thought. You're going to look at your dogs a little differently, and you're going to look at Norse mythology a little differently. So we're coming up towards the end. I do not see any comments or questions beyond me saying hi to Jeff Holman. So going around the panel, is there anything you want to say in closing? Let's start with Matt, then go counterclockwise.
I don't know. Do you want me to talk about other work I've done, or just wrap it up?
Wrap it up.
Just wrap it up. Well, basically, I really hope that everyone enjoys my entry into this anthology. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed working on the last anthology as well. Sort of, that one was much more science based. But no, it's awesome to be able to be a part of this. So thank you, Jack, and I can't wait to read everybody else's. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Teresa.
Well, to wrap it up, I hope you back the Kickstarter and you read all our stories. And it's a shame that Eddie couldn't jump in. He's a writer. He surely had a lot more interesting things to say about the story than me. But you get stuck with the artist, and all I can say is that it looks pretty good. So if I were you, I would back it.
Is that me next?
Yes.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying looking at all the pieces of the anthology. I definitely think that you guys should back it. For my piece, the thing that, just to piggyback on what Teresa said before, is when you use anthropomorphic animals, like there's no color barrier, there's no race barrier, there's no gender barrier. They're just like they're two things. So in a world that is completely polarized, it's nice to be able to read things like Teresa's piece and like see that like you can tell stories that are more than like that rise above and sit in more universal truths. And that's what I tried to do in my story in both of the anthologies. And one of the things I really appreciate about Jack is that he really allows for you to explore faith and the universe and your questions within it in a safe space. And I think that's what I get from the anthologies, and I hope that's what you get from them too.
And me, yeah, just echoing what everybody else is saying. You check out the anthology, both Why Faith and the upcoming Kickstarter. They are great spaces and safe spaces to explore questions around faith and a lot of perspectives on the question. And the artwork from everybody is great. It's good to see everybody's artwork, and I'm excited to see more. So yeah.
And thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to all of our creators here. It was so great to do this, especially because this was my first time running this, especially on StreamYard. So I hope that you all have enjoyed it. The Great Commandment anthology launches on Kickstarter October 13th. Please tell everyone about it. You will be able to get Why Faith. You will be able to get things that we didn't even get a chance to talk about, like the deluxe version, which will have even more artwork and behind the scenes pages. And keep asking these really fascinating questions. The only way we start getting our answers is when we screw up the courage to ask. Thank you all so much for participating. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, and good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.